Welcome to WLF Conversations. My guest today is Michelle Cotter-Richards, and I'm so excited to have her here today. Michelle and I met, I don't know, Michelle, was it about 5 years ago, I think, when we first met?
Maybe more, but yeah, at least five
Even
years ago.
more. Yeah, time goes by so fast, but we bonded. I remember when I first heard about you, Michelle, you had some videos on emotional intelligence. And I, several years before, when I had gotten my coaching degree and had committed myself to bringing emotional intelligence into law firms. And then I came upon you and I was like, we need to work together in some way. We just connected so much on that as a theme of being so important for everybody, but particularly in law firms. So really thrilled you're here today to have this conversation with me. And one of the things I like to do is just ask you to introduce yourself, because I think it's so interesting for our alumni and friends to hear how different women introduce themselves. So do you mind telling us a little bit about you?
Absolutely not. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this. So I'm Michelle Cotter-Richards, and about 5 years ago, I started a practice to really focus on helping lawyers kind of harness their strengths to achieve the type of success that they want to achieve. I started my own career as a lawyer, and I think having come from a very blue-collar background, my parents are from another country. The thing that shocked me when I finally sort of achieved the dream of being in a law firm was I looked around and all these other people who I admired and respected so much were just so unhappy. And it didn't make any sense to me because both of my parents had my mom was a nurse, my dad was a carpenter, but they loved their work. And it just made no sense to me that you could work so hard and put so much of yourself into something and not find that sort of satisfaction. So it's been a really interesting. I've been actually working specifically with lawyers now for 15 years. So it's been really, really interesting. And I think, there's so many things about me that I think I really understand where lawyers are coming from, even though I haven't practiced in, 10 years. And yet there's so many things about me that I just am right there with the lawyers and doing it. So, it's been a real journey, and it's an honor to continue to do that work.
Great, thank you. And so just to give our listeners just a little bit more background, Michelle, in addition to going deep into emotional intelligence, she wrote a book called Originate. What is the rest of the sentence?
Oh gosh, the Originate,
A
achieving so bad, achieving authentic and sustainable success in big law.
Okay.
That doesn't quite sound as punchy as when I wrote it, and I'm blanking, but
So, but it is like the most famous book for law firm business development. And that's another place that she and I really bonded, because I had a 15-year business that was around business development for law firms. And now she and I are really excited because we're sort of combining our love of emotional intelligence with leadership, with business development, and hoping to have an offer for our women that it's a gap that we think is really missing out there. So love to ask you, Michelle, I guess let's just start with Michelle also has children. So she's working at home, she's getting a master's, and she's working with me. She's got a lot of hats. How are you doing in the midst of the pandemic?
yeah, and we just Susan and I were just working together on a workshop around powerful questions, and Susan always gets me every time she says, when we talk, and I have the privilege of her asking me this question: how are you doing, really? And you just feel that pull of wanting to be really authentic. And Susan always opens conversations that way. But what I've noticed during sort of the past, it's 3 months now, it pulls a lot of complicated feelings from me, right? I'm always really optimistic. And it's just an interesting time. I have found myself responding to that question now as with mediocre, because that's sort of the average, right? There are real highs, but there's real lows. And I think the biggest challenge for me right now, and this is, I think, something that resonates with the lawyer part of me, is just the unknowns, the absolute, there's sort of nothing you can point to or latch onto that helps you predict what's going to happen going forward. And I'm really struggling with that. I find that really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, and you are so not alone. It feels like in all of our groups right now, that's just a theme running through, like, how long is this going to last? How long can I sustain it? I can't plan for anything. I can't plan my career. I can't even plan my vacation. So definitely seeing that across the board. So Michelle, in your work, which is broader, because you work with lawyers and non-lawyers now, curious, what are you noticing about women during this time? Any observations, anything you're noticing that you think we should be talking about, or anything that's surprising you?
So I think one of the things, I guess I'll start first with, I think, the silver linings or the positives that I've seen, which is with the lawyers that I work with, which is primarily through WLF, I have seen astounding adaptation and innovation in women just really adjusting and making it work, right? Like, I think someone called it, building the airplane while it's taking off, right? And I have seen that day after day. And it's not surprising because I think, women who are succeeding in law firms, women who are on, the path to success in law firms are probably among the most remarkable women on the face of the earth, right? And they can do anything they set their minds to. So that's been really inspiring. I think the thing that troubles me, and I'm experiencing it personally, I've seen it in both my lawyer and non-lawyer clients, is, women have always disproportionately carried, in most cases, kind of the load of emotional labor, right? I think that's a concept people are familiar with, where, we may have spouses and partners who are really, pitching in different ways, but they don't know the name of the pediatrician. They couldn't tell you your child's shoe size, or when, soccer practices, whatever. And even though all of those things have sort of condensed, right? We're not running around getting things to practice or birthday party gifts or whatever. All that stuff has really quieted down. What I have seen and what I've experienced is a disproportional taking on of the kind of emotional center of the family, right? I think a theme really has been is that we knew it, but we weren't aware of it as much as we are now, that our schools, our daycares, our camps, our grandparents, our family and friends who are maybe close, but we can't see them, or out of town and we can't see them, were equal members of our family, equal members of kind of family supports and things that helped keep us all, happy, healthy, and on the right track. And so when kind of 1/3 of that equation is gone, women have really been the ones stepping in to fill that gap. And, in many cases, that's on top of other gaps that they're filling in the workplace, right? So, I mean, one of the things that I think is analogous professionally is, women are really stepping up to be the kind of emotional center of their families. And all the people that I know who are working with teams, legal teams and other teams, it's women who are saying, you know what? I think, the associates are getting left behind. I'm getting the sense they're feeling really disconnected, or I'm getting the sense that this associate who was struggling a little bit, in February, is kind of falling further and further and behind. So what are we going to do to kind of help that person? So I think, as always, it's a disproportionate share of something. And I just think the stakes on that have gone up a lot since March.
It's so interesting because we think about how under stress we fall back on our old habit behaviors, right?
Yes.
And in some ways, from a systemic perspective, it feels like that's what you're talking about, that
Absolutely.
We're all under stress, and our habit, if we can name a monolithic habit, which we can't, but generally, is to caretake and take that role, and the men allow it. It's both groups, and such an interesting perspective of how we're also doing that at work. I see that a lot, but I don't know that I would have named it.
Well, and just like emotional labor, right, which is largely, I mean, totally uncompensated at home, that type of sort of cultural knitting that I'm hearing women do now is invaluable, right? But also not compensated necessarily, right? But these are the steps that are going to drive retention, drive high functioning teams, optimize people's ability to do their best work consistently. And it's often not visible. And it certainly isn't necessarily taken into account when it comes to compensation decision time or partnership decision time. And so that's one of the things that I've really been thinking about is how can we be more transparent about the work we're doing, this emotional labor that, there's a large portion of it. I mean, I think that's such a good point. We kind of revert, right? But I think there's a large portion of it that we enjoy doing.
Mhm.
And so how can we be more transparent about that so that there's an opportunity for a systemic shift that makes more sense, right? A more sharing of it, but also so that we get credit for it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Such a big conversation. I mean, talk about something like we always are wanting to tee up questions that we're not talking enough about. I think that's one that we're not talking enough about. How do we get credit for work that kind of work that's so invaluable and yet not part of the compensation system?
A related point is I was speaking with the capital chapter of the Association of Law Firm Administrators, and these are basically the non-legal leaders in law firms. And they're primarily women, the members. And it's similar, right? When new things come up related to law firm operations or different ways the organization needs to flex, those responsibilities are naturally being allocated to these women, right? So it's really interesting that I think, if you think about all the different people that have acted as bridges to make what's happening now work, I bet if there was some way to measure it, you would see it's primarily women doing that work, right? It's
So
primarily women doing those contortions.
so interesting. Well, I'm sure that the people listening to us might be able to tell that you and I could go on this subject for a long time. And when we thought of having this interview, the main thing we thought is, how are we going to keep it to 12 minutes, which we might be over. But anyway, so we always like to add a piece at the end that's really just like, what do you think practically women can be doing to not only survive this period, but could really help us through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think two things. I think, in any situation of overwhelm, what my first step always is to go back to what I call basics. And that's really to kind of get back in touch with what are my strengths and what are my values, right? And there's lots of different ways to kind of explore that. And once I get a little bit of clarity about those again, which, can take literally 60 seconds, it often helps me make a decision or make a plan going forward. Because there's just too many things to choose from. There's too many decisions to be made. So it's one way to just create a little bit of a threshold that is helpful. The second thing, and this is something that I'm always like, two birds, one stone, right? None of us have time. So one of the other things that I've been doing and I've been working with other people to do is deepening connections with what I call like latent contacts, right? So people that maybe I haven't talked to in a while, but who I genuinely like. And I have a sense that they like me. Just calling them, not just FaceTiming them, because I understand that that's a faux pas, although I have been known to do it myself, FaceTiming without warning. But just calling them.
That's horrifying.
It's horrifying. I know, it's terrible. I hate when people do it to me, which is why I stopped doing it. But yeah, just calling them, and a lot of times these are going to be clients who maybe are dormant or active, but maybe you're not working on a matter for them or something, or other colleagues, and just kind of checking in and hearing what's going on. It's good for you because you have an opportunity to connect with somebody, and it's good for them because nobody's, I think, someone told me the first 3 weeks of March, they got something like 917 client alerts, right? From all the different firms that they were, had relationships with. And so, that ship has sailed, right? You're either busy right now or you're not. And so the name of the game right now is relationship nurturance. But I think we have to do it in a way that's authentic and meaningful to us. Because otherwise you may as well just send, the 918th client alert for all it'll be worth.
I love it. I do. I totally agree with you that connecting and really finding out how they're doing, is just a huge opening right now.
Yeah. And, I found people have good days and bad days independent of each other, right? So if you're having a bad day and you call someone, they might be having a good day. and that may help you have a better day, right? And vice versa. So
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michelle.
it's my
Really
pleasure.
fun. And I hope you all enjoyed our conversation, and we will see you next time. Thank you, guys. Bye.